So it's a great pleasure to welcome Deanna Shemek from the University of California, Santa Cruz to UCHRI. She is the convener and central player in the Digital Princess project, now currently in residence, coming to a screen near you soon. And so it's a pleasure to have you here. I thought I'd just start off by asking you to convey to us what it is the project is about and what people are doing together.
Sure. The project has been renamed IDEA, Isabella d'Este Archives, and it's about, in some senses, it's a traditional preservation and access project in that we are using archival materials that are normally well out of reach for most people and that are, of course, in danger because they're hundreds of years old. We are putting them into an interactive platform that is now developed, and we've started to use it and play with it in the last week as we were here. It was very exciting. But it's also a teaching and research tool of a kind of different nature that's only possible now with digital technology. Aside from putting all these archival documents, which is a huge correspondence of over 16,000 outgoing letters and a total of 30,000 letters, including the incoming correspondence, online in navigable form that allows a kind of searching and filing and interactivity among scholars who can actually consult each other in the community function. Aside from that, we're also wanting to intervene in the art historical kind of pedagogy and teaching by taking a space that is now empty and that belonged to Isabella d'Este, the Marchesa of Mantua, 1474 to 1539. Her gallery space was really renowned in the 16th century, and because it was the first time that a woman had actually put together a gallery space, which was called a studiolo. It was normally a male preserve. Men were in the habit in those days of putting together their accoutrements of their learning and displaying their art and having themselves painted in those spaces, etc. She was the first woman who got the idea of doing this as a sort of self-projection, a kind of self-fashioning gesture. And those rooms, little tiny apartments rooms, are part of pretty much every Western art history course at university level. Everybody has at least their moment with Isabella d'Este's studiolo, but they're empty now. So the way that those things are taught is by putting together slides and slides of floor plans and images of the empty rooms. And we think that we can do better with that, better than that. So we're actually working with some really exciting options to digitize that space either in 2 dimensions or even in 4 using augmented reality. And then there's a third part, which is actually about her music, because she was actually a very pivotal player in the foundation of Western secular music. And one of our collaborators is Anne McNeil from University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, who is dedicating her time on the project to putting that music online and videoing musicians who can teach people how to play it. So it's very multi-pronged. And then there are offshoots that'll be coming off as we've been talking in this period while we've been here. There are people who want to actually put a fashion element on, because she was also a big player in the sort of fashion of the 16th century, and also I guess what we're calling applied arts, because she was a big collector of objects. So that was, sorry, a long answer, but it's a kind of complicated
project. It's a marvelous figure. I mean, she sounds like a mix of Beyonce and Lady Gaga of her time.
Sort of.
and then some.
I've had Wayne Kustenbaum, whose work you may know, described her as the Jackie O of the 16th century, and other people have described her as Martha Stewart, which is, you know, maybe aiming a little bit low, but she was an incredible multitasker, very hands-on, kind of a control freak, but governor and involved in all of these different kind of projects that.
And the site sounds like it's a living site, that it's going to have, layers added to it as it lives and breathes and grows and.
Oh yeah.
That's terrific. I mean, is there a capacity for once it's up and running, for people to comment, to contribute, to interact.
Absolutely.
That's social media space.
That is one of the things that is most innovative about the platform that we're using. We have been working with the Medici Archive Project in Florence, who have built over the last 3.5 years this new platform that they call BIA, Building Interactive Archives. And BIA actually has a community function in it. It has all of this interactive stuff that normal databases don't have. We've been comparing what we have with IDEA, powered by BIA, what we have with this to the sort of static platform that the archive was about to adopt before we came along and kind of scooped up, you know, the energy and got them on board with us. And, you know, the difference there in terms of interactivity is extreme. But the really exciting thing about this is that the community space function will allow both scholars who may be in points as far away as Australia and Europe and Canada, et cetera, which our group was that we assembled here, that's their home institutions are in all those places. Not only scholars, but actually general users will be able to you know, log on, they have to log on, and they'll be able to participate in conversations, ask questions. I get every year a few inquiries from school children about Isabella d'Este, and they have found me online, and they want to know this or that about her, and you know, right now I just have to answer them, you know, the way you can answer them now without this kind of tool, but I will love it when I can send them to the community, and or they can find it themselves and ask questions. And we're hoping actually that the people who visit Mantua every year and go to the Ducal Palace, or who have, you know, the general readership that's interested in all those novels, you know, about the Italian Renaissance, will be stimulated by this too, and we welcome that. So part of this is about responding to the fact that archives are underfunded more now than ever, and it's more difficult for people to get funding to go to an archive. And you know, there was an earthquake in Mantua last year that threatened to close the whole thing, and luckily it stayed open. So this is in part a way of allowing research to keep going, even though people can't get directly to the archive. But it's also about promoting culture and promoting dialogue and teaching opportunities, learning opportunities. There are a lot of really smart people out there, little ones and big ones, who you know, who are very savvy and want to learn and can learn a lot online.
I mean, it's a very interesting point that both the composition of the archive and its engagement is now distributed, right? That I mean, before archives were very located, and there's a virtue to that too. I mean, to being located in a context, in a space.
Yeah.
But the virtue of the digital is precisely to distribute and make more broadly available the kind of interactivity, so that people who might not have the means or the time or the capacity to go elsewhere can nevertheless go online and transport themselves virtually. We hope to add a kind of paleographic function so that people can learn in some short lessons how to read the documents if they're interested in that part. And my dream too is to have a kind of young people's you know, section where there'll be somewhat more accessible materials. But so it's in translation as well? I mean, it's materials are...
this is an interesting thing. Then this is a political question too, right?
Yeah, of course.
We've had really interesting discussions about this because the Medici Archive project is, the entire site is in English except for the transcribed documents and of course the images of the documents. The transcriptions are obviously transcriptions of things in Italian and Latin, so there they go. There's a summary in English, and all of the navigational materials are in English. We're working with that because some people in the group think that it's really important to include Italian versions of this material, and others are arguing that English is the global language of scholarship now, and we're still trying to figure that out. But some of the help functions, and we'll have an about page, we'll have certainly some functions that'll be in Italian, because we do want to reach out to people who aren't necessarily ready to tackle this in English. But you know, the documents, we're not translating the documents. That was a decision.
Oh, interesting.
The site does not have a space. We didn't create a box for the translation of the document. We have the transcription, we'll have summaries, translations will still be, they can be done in the community function. I'm personally publishing about 800 translations shortly, so
as a separate
thing, as an edition, a paper edition. Yeah.
Interesting.
So I'm very fond of, very committed to translation, but this is a hard question. Just yesterday in the Chronicle of Higher Education, there was an article about one of the main polytechnics of Milan moving toward potentially entirely English instruction. And you've probably heard the thing about the French universities,
sure.
which came out in the news yesterday. So, I regard that with great ambivalence.
Yeah, indeed. I mean,
I'm a professional who's dedicated her life to working in a different language, and I love bringing my students into that world.
Well, our colleague here, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, the well-known
of course.
Kenyan writer, has made a career of the politics of translation for good reason, right? I mean, earlier on refusing to write in English at all, and now writing first in Kikuyu, and then doing his own translation from Kikuyu into English.
That's exciting.
Not quite simultaneous, but for important reasons.
Right.
Not unrelated. I was going to ask you, I can convey that you have an incredible work schedule among the group. It's fantastic to see. But it's daunting. I mean, whatever time of the day or night anybody comes in here, your group is in some formation.
Yeah.
And that's encouraging to see, of course. And there are obviously a whole range of collaborative players, both in-house with you, but also sort of spread out somewhat across the world. I'd like to ask you, in a way, another political question about the politics of collaborative work and engagement. The challenges, how you see the collaboration working. I mean, we think of humanists, somewhat wrong-headedly as sitting alone and working alone, and it's more difficult than anything to get beyond the stereotype, right? And it is indeed a stereotype that is both misleading and probably not to our credit. Right.
Well, it's true. I thought that I was kind of collaborative before this, and I've always owned the fact that I depend on a lot of people. When I go to the archive myself, I can't do my work without the archivists, without other people in the room whom I consult. We all depend on our graduate students, and our students are collaborators in the classroom, etc. But, you write your book alone in the end, and you need time alone in order to do that. This project combines that kind of thinking with a radically widened sphere of collaboration, because none of us could do this work without the others. It's impossible. I mean, this is the state of digital humanities today. It's probably going to continue, although, I expect in the current generation of graduate students, or at least the next generation of graduate students, we'll find people who are both digital and humanities, etc. They're out there, but they're harder to find than you think. So the digital folks, the IT people that we work with, couldn't possibly do our work. They want to play with the codes. We can only explain to them what we want and negotiate with them about how it can happen, and watch as their eyes glaze over, or sometimes they roll their eyes about, our naive idea, or they get excited because we're open in ways that they say other humanists aren't. But because it's really interdisciplinary in ways that exceed those of most individual scholars' work, it's also that I learn every day from the colleagues in music. I like to study art history, but I don't know the material that they know, and they don't know the linguistic and the textual material that I know. And then we have people who really know archives, and I thought I knew archives kind of, but I don't know archives in that way. And so we find ourselves just constantly recombining into 2s and 3s and 10s in the case of our workshop, and sometimes the discussion is kind of heated as we clash, methodologies and assumptions, but it's incredibly liberating and growth-inducing. So, and then we have the time now that when we're not together, we're collaborating on Skype, and we're dealing with each other's time zones. So somebody's tired, and somebody's just waking up, and we just have to keep doing it. You know, it's.
I wonder if there's not a friendly revision to the comment that one writes one's book in the end on one's own, because even when one's sitting alone,
of course,
writing the book, one's constantly in conversation with the range of texts and arguments and so on, right? That are so it's a different form of collaborative engagement, but nevertheless collaborative.
Sure. Even Eric Auerbach, who claimed to have written Mimesis all by himself without his books, was constantly referring to his books and to obviously to colleagues, but that work of writing always takes place surrounded by one's references, both mental and concrete, and so it's always been a fiction. It was a fiction in the 16th century. It was a fiction in Dante's time. It's always been a fiction in our lifetimes, and not a very healthy one. The whole business of how, and this is political too, the whole business of how scholarship is evaluated, is always calling on people to say what they did alone, as though that were more valuable. And if we talk to our scientist colleagues, they'll tell us that that they're told not to work alone, that collaborative work is much more valued, and they don't worry about, which piece was theirs, not as much as we do.
Right. Yeah, so is there anything else you'd like to add about your project and where you see it going and taking you?
Well, how much time do you have? Two things, I guess. One is I'm very excited about the outreach that we're having right now with people at the Supercomputer Center in Urbana-Champaign, where we may actually be doing something that is, even for me, just kind of hard to imagine, and working in forms, ways of visualizing our material that may actually take us into three-dimensional space and include a kind of installation, capacity. That's something we didn't dream of before we started, and that wouldn't have come about if we hadn't been able to be here together. So I guess my parting word is just thank you, and this has been absolutely crucial. Describing all the things I've described, I hope I've conveyed how really impossible it would have been to do this if we hadn't been able to have the time and the space and the support to come together to work as we have every day, and every night.
That's very gratifying to hear. Thank you very much. We are committed to providing open spaces for people to find what they need and to experiment. And your group has been wonderfully experimental in exactly the right kind of way. Experiments sometimes fail. We're open to that too.
Sure.
One learns a great deal from sort of things that slip and slide all over the place.
Sure.
But it's very gratifying to both to see how much you've achieved in the short time you've been here, and we look forward to seeing the outcome.
Thanks very much.
Cheers.